Mary Ann Holtman Schultz.
And where are you from originally? Where were you born?
Quincy, Illinois.
Okay. Okay, Ben, go ahead.
Right. In the war, were you drafted or did you enlist?
No.
You were.
They didn't draft women then. I signed up voluntarily.
And where were you living at the time?
In Chicago. I took my nurse's training at Michael Reese in Chicago.
And why did you want to join?
Because I just thought it was the thing to do.
A lot of people joined at that time?
Yeah.
A lot of your friends?
From that hospital at the beginning of the war, they made up Michael Reese Overseas Unit. And it took 50 nurses and 30 doctors from our staff, which left a big hole.
Oh, yeah. All right. Do you recall your first days as a nurse?
As a nurse?
In the Army? Yeah.
Yes. Very well. I was in basic training, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin.
Can you tell me about any of your first experiences throughout the war, early on, later?
Well, we had basic training. This is where and how I was assigned. After our basic training, I was sent to Camp Kilmer in New Jersey. And that camp received all the wounded from Europe. And we would take them into our hospital, classify them, and send them to the nearest veterans hospital to their home.
And, I'm sorry?
That was the main purpose of Camp Kilmer.
Do you remember a lot of the people that you worked with, helped out?
Yes, I remember a lot of them. Wonder what in the world happened to them.
Yeah. Anyone in
Remember,
particular?
I'm soon going to be 84.
Okay, yeah.
I can tell you from Camp Kilmer, I was assigned to Fort Jackson to go overseas. Fort Jackson is at Columbia, North Carolina, the capital of North Carolina. We were there about 2 months, and then we were given orders to go overseas, and were issued, this is typical Army, we were issued both summer-winter clothing, and we didn't know where we were going.
Oh, yeah.
So we got on the ship, and the ship we got on happened to be a luxury liner that was made in the late 20s, and it was all wooden. And we wanted to hear some creaks.
Wow.
And we eventually went down through the Panama Canal up to California, got off of it, and again, a week or so later, we got on another ship and went to, I did anyway, I went to Manila by the ocean sea. From Manila, I was there for about a week, and then I was flown over to Okinawa.
Okay. Throughout the war, did you stay in touch with your family?
Oh, yes.
Like letters?
When I was on Okinawa, there was a service there of making a phone call, and the telephone company charged $12 for 3 minutes.
Wow.
And you had to make an appointment. And so I made one, and I got there. And apparently the radio reception that day was terrible. And this was around Christmas time. My mother and aunt were over here, and all I could hear was, "Did the pajamas fit?" Because she had sent me pajamas for Christmas. And that cost $12. And that was all of the conversation we had. We had mail, of course.
How long would it take for mail to get from one place to the next?
Well, if you sent it air mail, it would be about a week.
And how often would you get mail?
Well, that depends on how often.
I mean, if someone sent you something every day, would you get mail every day? Was there service to you every day?
Oh.
What was the food like in the service?
Well, that's what I was saying before. We didn't have fresh fruit or vegetables for the 14 months I was over there. And I had acquired a lot of gray hair when I was in my 20s then. And the minute I came back to the States and got a balanced diet, the gray hair left for some reason or other, which was kind of peculiar, for which I was glad at that time.
Do you have something that stands out as the most memorable part of your life in the service?
Well, you know, you only remember the fun things, the good times you had. The bad times are kind of packed way back. We made our own fun on Okinawa because we didn't even have a movie in a shack to see. And, of course, there was drinking, so we all drank because there's nothing else to do, you know. And we had a gang together, and I don't know if you want to hear this story or not.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And we called ourselves the Ghouls. And we decided to put on a party. So we got one of those big steel vats you've seen them from a kitchen, about that big around, every bit of that deep. And we went behind the bar, and we emptied every bottle that was on the bar into this vat. And the only other thing we had to mix it with was grape juice, and that was called Ghoul Gruel. And we would put signs up all over the island. Now remember, the island's only 60 miles long. And we kept that up for a couple of weeks. And then we finally put the date where it was going to be held. And when everybody came, we seated them, and then everybody in the gang put on a mop head and took a brown mascara around our eyes. And we had a dentist in the unit, and he made us all false teeth that slipped up over our regular teeth. We had fangs coming out of our mouth. And we came in the back way. One guy was carrying dragging a log chain, and everybody that was sitting at the bar, we also had a scrub gown on and rubber gloves. Before we came in, we dipped our rubber gloves in water. And I don't know whether you've ever had that sensation before or not, but we took our hands and went all over their face with this, you know, looking like we did. Then we went into the main room and had 2 candles because they were going to bring in the head ghoul. Well, they brought him in on a gurney, and he was in a wooden box. So we had a big ceremony opening the lid, and when we opened the lid, this guy was laying there smoking a cigarette in the box. Oh, God, he could have died so fast.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, and in order to get something to drink, they had to go view the body. They passed by the casket. And we served our gruel out of bedpans and urinals. And that, if you could have seen the reaction on some of the people, it was well worth the price of admission to see that. Of course, the urinals and bedpans were sterilized. When they first saw that, but it was good. It was surprisingly very good. Really it was.
Good to know.
Were you ever awarded any medals or citations while in the service?
Good conduct.
Good conduct. That's good enough.
I guess they didn't go to your party, I guess.
No, didn't allow it.
Go down to segment 5 then.
Do you recall the day when your service ended? You
Yeah.
got to come home?
Yeah, I sure do.
How'd you feel about that?
I was ready. I was ready to get out. You might be interested in that we were living in Quonset huts. Even the hospital was a Quonset hut. And I experienced typhoons. One was on the sea, and the other one was on land. On the sea was very remarkable, I might say. And on land, the Quonset huts are made out of 8 by 10 corrugated tin. And when the wind came with the typhoon, some of the huts, they ripped pieces of the tin off, and you could see them go through the air like a piece of tin foil. They also would pick up the telephone poles, and they went through, thought it was a toothpick.
Wow.
So you had to stay at your station of duty until the typhoon was over. No one was allowed off. Now the GIs over there, they were smart. They went into one of the Okinawan tombs, which was hewn out of the rock there. That's the way where they buried their dead. So they just got a fifth of whiskey and went into one of those tombs and waited until the typhoon was over. But we had to stay on our station.
And how did you feel when you finally came back home?
Very good. Sometimes I missed it.
Yeah.
And as I say, you only remember really the good things.
That's good.
That happens. We still, see, I wasn't there during the attack on Okinawa, but soon afterwards. And they were still flushing Japanese out of the caves on the island. And the Japs had been taken over to the island about 10 years before Pearl Harbor. And they had it well stocked, and they had all their guns in placement, very well done. And that's why they say we lost 45,000 men. It kind of gets to you.
Is there any more?
How about after the service? What did you do after the service?
Oh, I was married, but I also worked. So
Where did you work?
I worked I opened the first infirmary at Good Samaritan in the early 60s. And then I worked at Electric Wheel First Aid Station and retired from Electric Wheel.
What brought you to Quincy?
I was born here,
Okay.
born and raised.
So you went from Quincy to Chicago.
Yes, for my training.
Okay. What are close friendships?
Did you make any close friendships while you were
Oh, yes, for years.
Tell us a little.
This one nurse and I, we were close. She subsequently died. And now, I don't know where, the rest of the people are. As I say, I'm going to be 84, so some of them were older than me, so I doubt whether they're still among us.
So is there anything that we haven't covered, any stories you'd like to tell that might be helpful?
Well, I don't know if you know anything about typhoons or not, but they, as a hurricane, they also have eyes, and the Air Force had to fly into the eye to see how big it was and how long a typhoon would last. When you got the first half of the typhoon, you got all this wind and all this rain, and then the eye would hit, and everything was just still. There wasn't a leaf move on the trees. It was eerie, and there was a peculiar hue to the sky in the eye. And then here come the second half, and boom, it hit you. And one time we had a weather officer over there that called all clear during the eye. So the people started to go about their own business when the second half of the typhoon hit them. But luckily, no one was injured badly. I don't know what happened to the weather officer.
Imagine.
You might be interested in what the Okinawans did with their dead. They would hew these caved out of the side of the hill, and we figured out it was the shape of a uterus. And in it was steps, 3-4 steps. And when someone died, they would place the body on those steps and close the tomb. And after X number of months, years, or whatever, they would send the oldest virgin of the family into the tomb, and she had to take off the remaining flesh. It's macabre. Off of the skeleton. That was her duty. And then the bones were put in like an urn. But that was the way they buried her. Had a big deal over a funeral. The men all wore white robes and big, tall, black hats. And they would beat the drums and clang the, what do you call those things, cymbals? Mm-hmm. Made a lot of noise, and fly the fish flag. And that protected them from any evil, particularly the dead person. That was very interesting.
Anybody else think of any questions?
I got one. Did you ever come across anybody like historically famous whenever you were down there? Any like famous generals or anything?
No, I didn't want to come across MacArthur.
What did you know about him then?
Well, and there is no one from the South Pacific that would have anything good to say about him. And the time he was fired by President Truman was one of the best things that ever happened. In fact, I was almost ostracized in my neighborhood. I lived in California because they were all civilians, and they had MacArthur built up like a little tin god, you know. And I'm happy as a lark he was fired. They thought that was terrible. So I'll tell you why. When I went on leave up to Japan, the Army had taken over the Daiichi building, which was a big business building. And that's where he had his offices. And every time he decided to go to his office, from his home, he would have an MP, a Jeep, in front of him and in the back of him, and all four at a crossroads, the traffic was stopped, and he'd get out of his car and walk up the steps to the building, and the Japanese police would line the steps. This was every time this joker went to his office, and the same thing happened every time he went home, however many times a day, which didn't go very well with Americans, but the Japanese thought that was okay, because they were used to worshiping the emperor, you know. I will say one thing about MacArthur: he did get the emperor to admit that he was not God, which Japanese believed.
Okay.
That might be all we have.
Thank you very much.
You're